What if I told you that Rome's greatest walls were built for more than just stopping enemies? These gigantic structures were more than just stone and mortar. They were living systems, economic engines, and powerful psychological weapons aimed both outward and inward. Their main purpose was not to wage war, but to prevent it by demonstrating the very idea of order. The Romans did not just build a barrier, they built a border between civilization and what they considered chaos. This line, stretching for thousands of kilometers, changed not only the landscape but also the consciousness of millions of people. Watch the video to the end to find out how this complex system actually worked and why the wall was not the end, but the beginning of Roman influence. I will reveal the best-kept secret. Roman walls were primarily a propaganda tool and only secondarily a defensive structure. The Romans understood that demonstrating power is often more effective than directly using it. The construction of a multi-kilometer, perfectly flat wall in a wild area was an act that declared the empire's unlimited resources and capabilities. Any traveler or merchant who saw this structure immediately understood the power they were dealing with. It was an architectural declaration that this was where the territory of Roman order, law, and power began. The wall served as a clear visual boundary, dividing the world into two parts. Inside was the Pax Romana, the Roman world, where laws were enforced, coins circulated, and cities were built. Outside lay lands that the Romans considered barbaric, unpredictable, and chaotic. This line was not so much military as cultural and ideological. It gave Roman citizens and subjects a clear sense of security and belonging to a great civilization. A project of this scale also solved an important internal problem. The construction of the walls required the efforts of tens of thousands of legionnaires over many years. It was the perfect job for the army in peacetime, when there were no major military campaigns. Legions not engaged in war could become a source of instability. Construction, on the other hand, maintained their discipline, honed their engineering skills, and physically tied them to the border. The visual impact of the wall was calculated with incredible precision. Towers spaced at regular intervals created a sense of total and constant control. Patrols moving along the top of the wall were visible from afar and demonstrated that this border was alive and under constant surveillance. For the tribes living on the other side, the wall was a constant reminder of Rome's presence. It was a factor that had to be taken into account when planning any action. The wall also created a new reality for the soldiers who guarded it. It transformed them from mobile conquering troops into a border garrison. Their lives became more sedentary, focused on routine patrolling and maintenance. This changed the very nature of the army on the frontiers, making it part of the permanent infrastructure. Soldiers began to perceive this land as their own and the wall as their home. Interestingly, many walls, such as Hadrian's wall in Britain, were built at a time when the empire had reached its maximum expansion. Emperors such as Hadrian realized that endless expansion was impossible and ineffective. The wall became the physical embodiment of a new doctrine, not to conquer, but to hold and civilize what already existed. It was a transition from an offensive strategy to a defensive and administrative one. The Romans also actively used the landscape to enhance the psychological effect. The walls often ran along hilltops or cliff edges, where they were visible for many kilometers around. They seemed like a natural extension of nature, but at the same time clearly man-made, demonstrating that the Romans were capable of conquering and changing the land itself. It was a message that not only people but also the elements were subject to their will. The construction of the wall itself was a lesson in engineering. Perfectly fitted stone blocks, complex internal structures, and the use of concrete all demonstrated technological superiority. Tribes that could only build with wood and earth saw before them a structure that seemed eternal. This demonstration of superiority was no less important than the physical barrier itself. Even the color of the material mattered. For example, Hadrian's wall was originally whitewashed to shine in the sun and be visible from even further away. This turned it into a shining symbol of purity and order in the midst of dark forests and swamps. The wall was not just a gray strip of stone, but a bright line drawn across the map of the world. Thus, even before the first enemy laid eyes on the wall, it was already doing its job. It worked on the subconscious, instilling respect, fear, and an understanding of the inevitability of Roman rule. It was the first and perhaps most important line of defense. We would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about this psychological use of architecture? Write about it in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next studies. Are you ready to learn the truth about what kept these walls standing for thousands of years? The secret lies not only in stone, but also in a revolutionary material: Roman concrete. Roman engineers were true masters of geodesy and logistics. Before starting construction, they carefully studied the terrain, choosing the optimal route. The wall had to not only take advantage of the landscape, but also have access to resources. Quarries, water sources, and roads for transporting materials were as important as the line of defense itself. The foundation was the basis of everything, and the Romans spared no effort in its construction. They dug wide and deep trenches, often reaching solid rock. The bottom of the trench was leveled and compacted, after which the first layers of large cobblestones were laid. This base had to withstand the enormous weight of the masonry. Particular attention was paid to drainage, so that water would not wash away the foundation from the inside. The walls were rarely monolithic, made of hewn stone, as this would have been incredibly expensive and time-consuming. The Romans used a more ingenious technique. They erected two parallel walls made of neatly hewn stone blocks. These blocks served as the outer and inner facing, giving the wall a neat and impressive appearance. They were the face of the wall, demonstrating Roman order and craftsmanship. The space between these two facing walls was filled with the heart and secret of strength. A mixture of crushed stone, broken stone, and mortar was poured in. This mortar was the very opus cementitium, or Roman concrete. It consisted of lime, water, and most importantly, volcanic ash, known as pozzolan. This ash reacted chemically with the lime to create an incredibly strong and water-resistant material. Over time, Roman concrete did not deteriorate, but on the contrary became stronger, crystallizing into a single monolith. It was not affected by rain or frost. It was this technology that allowed the Romans to build such massive and durable structures. In fact, the wall was a giant concrete beam clad in stone. The construction required a huge amount of materials, which had to be delivered to the site. Legionnaires laid special temporary roads from the quarries to the wall line. Stone was quarried on site whenever possible, which saved time and effort. Thousands of tons of limestone were burned in kilns to produce lime, one of the key components of mortar. The logistics of this process are mind-boggling. It was necessary to ensure the uninterrupted supply of not only stone and lime, but also sand, water, and wood for scaffolding. Ox carts and special wagons were used for transportation. All these activities were coordinated by military engineers with mathematical precision. The Romans used a variety of tools, many of which were inherited from the Greeks but improved upon. They used lifting cranes with large wheels powered by people. They had accurate levels, plumb lines, and measuring instruments. Each facing block was fitted with minimal gaps, which shows how skilled the masons were. Interestingly, the composition of concrete and masonry techniques could vary from region to region. In Britain, where there was no pozzolan, the Romans experimented with other additives, such as crushed brick. In Germany, they may have used more wood. Engineers were pragmatic and adapted basic technology to local conditions and resources. The scale of the work was enormous. For example, several million cubic meters of stone were used on Hadrian's wall. This work was mainly carried out by legionnaires, for whom engineering was as much a part of their service as military exercises. Each legion took pride in the section they built, sometimes leaving inscriptions on the stones. What other ancient engineering solutions do you admire? In the next chapter, we will talk about how the Romans turned these walls into the fastest information network of their time. What I am about to show you was the ancient internet. It was a secret that allowed legions to respond in hours rather than days, and it is one of the most unique features of the wall. The Roman wall was not just a passive barrier, it was a living, high-tech communication system. Its entire structure was permeated by a network of watchtowers and small forts. This concept transformed a static stone line into the nervous system of the border. At intervals of approximately every mile and a half, and sometimes more frequently, small forts known as mile castles or burgi were built along the wall. These were small fortifications with gates that allowed patrols to pass through the wall, but their main function was to serve as local command and communication centers. A small garrison was stationed here, responsible for its section. Between these small forts within visual contact were watchtowers, or turrets. Usually there were 2 towers for each small fort. They were positioned so that each tower could see the 2 neighboring towers. This created a continuous chain of visual communication along the entire border. The principle was simple but effective. Observers were constantly stationed at the top of each tower. They had a set of standard signals for transmitting information. During the day, smoke signals were used, with different volumes or colors of smoke signifying different messages. Flags or even large movable wooden panels, operating on the principle of a semaphore, could also be used. At night, the system became even more spectacular. Fire was used to transmit messages. These were not just bonfires, but a complex system of torches. Different numbers of torches, their location, or a specific sequence of lighting could convey specific messages. It was a kind of Morse code of the ancient world, based on light. The speed of information transmission using such a system was astonishing for the ancient world. A message about a threat or an important event could travel 100 kilometers in just 1 or 2 hours. For comparison, it would take a horse courier a whole day, if not more. This system gave the Roman command a huge strategic advantage. The messages were not primitive, such as, "The enemy is at the gates." There were entire code books that allowed for the transmission of fairly complex reports. For example, it was possible to report not only the appearance of the enemy, but also its approximate strength, type of troops, and direction of movement. This allowed the command not just to react, but to react appropriately. This information network was integrated with the legionary fortresses located in the rear. As soon as the alarm reached the fortress, the legions could be put on alert and moved to the necessary section of the wall. They moved along special military roads that ran parallel to the wall. Thus, the wall did not defend itself. It only gained time and indicated the exact place where the strike force should be directed. The garrisons of the towers and small forts kept constant watch. Their life was routine, but required maximum vigilance. They were the eyes and ears of the empire on the border. The security of the entire region depended on their ability to notice and correctly transmit the signal in time. This system shows how comprehensively the Romans approached border management. The wall was not a blunt barrier, but a complex tool. It combined a physical barrier, observation points, rapid communication, and logistical routes into a single organism. It was a technology that was centuries ahead of its time. If you enjoy learning about such hidden technologies of antiquity, please like this video. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos about the engineering genius of ancient Rome. What if I told you that the main function of the wall was not to stop people, but to let them pass through at strictly defined locations? The Roman wall was not a solid fence, but rather a filter. Along its entire length, gates, or portae, were located at regular intervals. These gates were not just passageways, but complex architectural and administrative complexes. The architecture of the gates was designed for maximum control over incoming and outgoing traffic. They were usually massive structures with 2 arched passageways separated by a central pillar. On both sides of the passages stood massive towers, which not only protected the passage but also served as barracks for the garrison and administrative offices. This made the gates resemble small fortresses within the wall itself. The structure was multi-layered. On the outside, there could be 1 or even 2 gates, followed by an inner courtyard. Only after passing through this courtyard did the traveler reach the second inner gate, which led to the territory of the empire. This system created a trap where anyone entering could be easily stopped, searched, and checked before being allowed to proceed. But the main function of these gates in peacetime was not defense, but economics. The gates were official customs posts. Any merchant wishing to import goods into the territory of the empire or export them had to pass through these gates. Here, his goods were carefully inspected, weighed, and evaluated. A tax known as portorium was levied on each item. This tax was an important source of income for the imperial treasury. Thus, the wall not only required enormous sums of money for its maintenance, but also helped to earn money itself. It transformed chaotic border trade into an orderly and fiscally controlled process. The gates also served as a border control system in the modern sense. People entering the empire were questioned to determine the purpose of their visit. They had to present documents, if they had any, such as military diplomas or special permits. This made it possible to screen out undesirable persons and keep track of migration flows. The gates were inextricably linked to the imperial road network. Each major gate was the beginning or end of a strategic military road, or vie, leading deep into the province. This turned the gates into key logistical hubs. Not only were supplies delivered to the garrisons of the wall itself through them, but all transit trade passed through them as well. The symbolic significance of the gates was also enormous. They were the facade of the empire. Therefore, they were often decorated with statues, reliefs, and dedicatory inscriptions. Passing through the monumental arch, one immediately felt the grandeur and power of Rome. It was as much a propaganda statement as the wall itself. The garrison stationed at the gates consisted not only of soldiers. Many civilian administrators worked here: scribes, tax collectors, translators. It was a complex bureaucratic apparatus that controlled life on the border. It was here that the main contact between the Roman world and the tribes from outside took place. Life was bustling at the gates. Just beyond them, on Roman territory, large settlements, or vici, sprang up. They were home to merchants, craftsmen, innkeepers, and soldiers' families. These settlements became centers of Romanization, where locals actively adopted the Roman way of life, language, and culture. Have you ever wondered how similar the modern border control system is to the Roman one? In the next chapter, we will look at what was located directly in front of the wall and why it was no less important than the stones themselves. The Roman fortification system was layered, when the stone wall itself was only the most visible part of it. The success of the defense depended largely on what happened in front of it. Engineers created a series of obstacles designed to slow down anyone approaching the wall. This strip was designed to deprive attackers of the advantage of surprise and speed. The main element of this zone was, of course, the moat, or fossa. The Romans were masters of earthworks and approached the creation of moats with scientific precision. It was not just a pit, but a carefully designed engineering structure. The moat was located at a certain distance from the wall, creating an open space or berm. The most common profile for the ditch was V-shaped. This profile was not accidental. It was more difficult to overcome than a ditch with a flat bottom. The slopes were steep, making it difficult to descend and ascend. At the bottom of the V-shaped moat, a narrow drainage channel, or cunei, was often made, which not only drained water but also served as an additional trap for feet. The depth and width of the ditches varied depending on the terrain and the perceived threat. On Hadrian's wall, for example, the ditch on the north side was up to 8 meters wide and 3 to 4 meters deep. Digging such a ditch, especially in rocky soil, was a titanic task. But the Romans understood that it was necessary for the effectiveness of the entire system. All the earth removed during the digging of the ditch was not wasted. It was used to create another obstacle, an earthen rampart or agger. This rampart was usually built on the outer side of the ditch, furthest from the wall. It served as the first barrier to be overcome and hid the ditch from direct view. A space called a berm was always left between the wall and the moat. Its width was precisely calculated. It was wide enough to prevent soil from the rampart from falling into the moat, but at the same time prevented attackers from placing siege engines close to the wall. This space was completely open and could be seen from the towers. In some cases, the Romans created even more complex obstacle systems. Descriptions and archaeological finds have survived, testifying to the existence of camouflage pits. These pits, known as lilia or lilies, had a narrow neck and a pointed stake was dug into the bottom. They were arranged in a checkerboard pattern in front of the moat, turning the approaches to the wall into a deadly zone. Another type of obstacle was the shipi, rows of stones or logs with pointed tops dug into the ground. They were designed to disrupt the formation of the attackers and hinder the cavalry. The entire system was designed to ensure that anyone crossing this zone did so slowly and with great difficulty. Maintaining these structures required constant attention. The moats had to be regularly cleared of fallen earth and debris. The earthen ramparts had to be reinforced so that they would not be washed away by rain. Garrisons were constantly engaged in this work, keeping the defensive structures in perfect order. The psychological effect of this dead zone was enormous. Any scout who saw this strip of ditches, ramparts, and hidden obstacles understood that a direct assault on the wall would be an extremely difficult task. This forced potential attackers to look for other, easier targets. Thus, these earthworks stopped enemies before they even reached the stone. Are you ready for the shocking truth? The wall was not protected by stones, but by the roads behind it. The Romans, being ingenious pragmatists, understood that even the most powerful wall was useless if reinforcements could not be quickly brought to it. The wall was only a censor, and the real force was the legions behind it. To ensure this mobility, the Romans built magnificent military roads, viae militares. One of these roads always ran parallel to the wall at a short distance from the inner Roman side. This road connected all the small forts, towers, and large fortresses into a single network. It was an artery through which supplies and soldiers flowed. The construction of these roads was an engineering masterpiece in itself. They were straight, sturdy, and designed for all-weather use. Road builders removed the top layer of soil down to solid ground, then laid layers of large stones, gravel, and sand to create a solid foundation. The road was paved with hewn slabs, and a system of drainage ditches on either side carried away water. Along this border road, at a distance of a day's journey from each other, were large legionary fortresses, or castra. These were not just barracks, but real military cities. They served as a permanent base for one or more legions, which constituted the main mobile reserve of the border. The layout of each fortress was standard and followed a strict pattern. A rectangle of walls divided by two intersecting main streets. In the center was the Principium, the headquarters, office, and sanctuary. Nearby were the legate's house, hospital, and workshops. Each cohort in Centuria had its own clearly designated barracks block. Special attention was paid to warehouses, or horea, in the fortresses. These were long buildings with a unique design. Their floors were raised above the ground on stone or wooden stilts. This provided ventilation and protected grain, the army's main food source, from rodents and dampness. The supplies in such warehouses could last for several months. The supply system, Annona Militaris, worked like clockwork. Food, weapons, clothing, and fodder were purchased centrally throughout the empire and delivered to border fortresses. Some of the supplies were provided by local farmers, who received money or tax breaks in return. This integrated the local economy into the imperial system. Clean water was vital for the garrison. Therefore, each large fortress had its own aqueduct that delivered water from mountain springs. Inside the fortress, there were complex water distribution systems, public baths, and sewage systems. This maintained a high level of hygiene and health among the soldiers. Thanks to this infrastructure, the response system was incredibly fast. An alarm signal from a tower on the wall reached the nearest fortress in a matter of minutes. Legionnaires, always ready for action, could receive orders, arm themselves, and march along the military road. Within a few hours, they were already at the section of the wall where their help was needed. The wall thus served as a stretch. It was not designed to withstand a prolonged siege by a large army on its own. Its task was to slow down the enemy, force them to concentrate in one place, and send a signal. Roads and fortresses in the rear ensured a quick and crushing response. It's amazing how interconnected the whole system was, isn't it? But what happened when an army did approach the wall? In the next chapter, we will look at siege technology. Roman walls were not designed to actively fight the enemy, but to make any attack pointless and ineffective. It was the philosophy of passive defense, perfected. Every element of the structure was designed to neutralize the standard siege tactics of the time. The first and most obvious parameter was height. The walls were high enough to make assault ladders cumbersome and vulnerable. Raising a long ladder and placing it against the wall under the watchful eye of patrols was an extremely difficult task. The width of the wall at the top was also important, preventing attackers from easily gaining a foothold on it. The thickness of the walls was designed to withstand battering rams. The massive stone and concrete masonry was capable of absorbing the energy of blows for hours and even days. A battering ram simply could not break through the monolithic core of opus caementitium, and to bring a battering ram to the wall, one first had to overcome the moats and ramparts. The towers were a key element of passive defense. They always protruded beyond the line of the wall. This design feature was critically important. It allowed observers on the towers to see the space along the wall in both directions. Anyone who tried to set up a ladder or ram at the base of the wall was within sight. The shape of the towers also evolved. Early towers were rectangular, but over time, the Romans increasingly built U-shaped or fan-shaped towers. This shape was more resistant to siege engines and gave observers a better field of view. The rounded corners of the fortresses also served this purpose, preventing siege engines from having blind spots. The teeth at the top of the wall, known as crenellaciones, were not just decoration. They consisted of alternating high and low sections. The high sections, merlons, served as cover for patrols and observers. The low sections, crenelles, allowed for observation. This simple system ensured safety when surveying the terrain. At the top of the wall was a wide battlements or valgang. It was wide enough for 2 patrols to walk side by side. This walkway allowed small units to move quickly along the wall to respond to incidents or for repair work. The stairs leading to the wall and towers were often narrow and steep. This was not for defensive purposes, but to save space inside the towers. The interior rooms of the towers served as barracks, warehouses, and observation posts. Everything was organized as compactly and functionally as possible. The gates were the most vulnerable point and were given special attention. As we have already mentioned, they were built like small fortresses. Several rows of gates, inner courtyards, and side towers made a direct assault on the gates virtually impossible. Anyone who broke through the first gate found themselves in a stone bag. The entire system was designed to operate with a minimal garrison. Small patrols, constantly moving along the wall and observing from the towers, could control vast areas. The wall was a force multiplier, allowing a handful of soldiers to guard a border that would have required entire legions to hold without the wall. It would be a mistake to think that the wall was just an expense for the empire. In fact, this gigantic infrastructure eventually became a powerful economic engine. It not only consumed resources, but also generated them, creating a new economic reality in the border provinces. The main and direct source of income was customs duties. As we already know, the wall channeled all border trade through strictly defined gates. At these customs houses, each merchant was charged a portorium tax. Given the volume of trade, these fees were a significant and constant source of revenue for the treasury. The wall created what trade values most: security and predictability. Merchants knew that by paying the tax, they would enter a territory where Roman laws applied. Their caravans were protected from bandit raids. This security attracted traders from all over the known world, turning the border areas into centers of international trade. The most noticeable economic effect was the birth of cities. At each major gate on the Roman side, settlements known as vici immediately sprang up. Initially, these were temporary camps for merchants, craftsmen, and innkeepers who served the garrison. But over time, they grew into full-fledged, thriving cities. These cities became melting pots. They were home to retired soldiers, their families, locals, and immigrants from across the empire. They became centers of Romanization, spreading the Latin language, Roman laws, and way of life far beyond the walls. The wall, therefore, was not the end, but the center of civilization. The wall's garrisons, consisting of thousands of soldiers, created a huge and stable demand. Soldiers needed food, clothing, shoes, weapons, and household items. The army did not produce all of this itself, but contracted local manufacturers. Local farmers began to grow grain and raise livestock specifically for the legions. Craftsmen in the vici specialized in army orders. Blacksmiths repaired weapons, shoemakers made military boots, and potters made dishes. Soldiers received regular salaries, which they spent in these same cities. This created a constant circulation of money that enriched the entire region. The construction and maintenance of the wall itself was a huge industry. Thousands of workers were needed for quarries, logging, and lime kilns. Transportation companies received contracts to transport materials. All this activity provided jobs for tens of thousands of people and stimulated the development of infrastructure. Roads built by legionnaires for military purposes were immediately put to use by merchants. Bridges, aqueducts, and drainage systems created for fortresses also benefited growing civilian settlements. Military engineering became the driving force behind civilian development. In this way, the wall transformed a wild and unstable border into a prosperous and economically developed province. It was not just a barrier, but a backbone on which new economic and social life grew. It was one of the most successful infrastructure projects in history. Investments in the wall paid off handsomely. Stability at the border allowed the empire to avoid spending resources on constant punitive expeditions. Security attracted investment and settlers. The wall proved that order and infrastructure are the best foundation for economic prosperity. For Roman soldiers, service on the wall was far from heroic. It was mostly monotonous and routine work that required discipline and endurance. It is important to understand that it was not the prestigious legions that served on the walls themselves, such as Hadrian's wall, but auxiliary troops or auxilia. The auxiliaries were recruited from non-citizens of Rome, often from conquered peoples. Service in the army was their main social ladder. After serving 25 years on the border, they received full Roman citizenship for themselves and their descendants. This was a powerful motivation that ensured loyalty and diligence. The composition of the garrisons was international. Soldiers from Gaul, Spain, Syria, or the banks of the Danube could serve on the wall in Britain. They brought with them their customs, language, and even beliefs. This created a unique border culture, a mixture of Roman order and local traditions. The main daily duty was patrolling, or rondi. Soldiers in small groups constantly walked their section of the wall, moving from tower to tower. They inspected the condition of the masonry, checked the ditches, and monitored the surrounding area. Any suspicious movement was immediately reported up the chain of command. The second important task was repair and maintenance. The wall was a complex mechanism that required constant care. In winter, frost could damage the masonry, rain washed away the ramparts, and the moats became clogged with debris. Soldiers were constantly engaged in construction and earthworks, keeping the infrastructure in working order. Life in small forts and towers was harsh. Soldiers lived in cramped barracks, often 8 to a room, called a contubernium. They slept on bunk beds and cooked their own food on a communal stove. Discipline was strict and duty was round the clock. Training or drill was an integral part of army life, even on the quiet border. Soldiers engaged in forced marches, fencing, javelin throwing, and drill exercises. This kept them in good physical shape and maintained their combat skills. In addition to military service, soldiers performed many administrative functions. They stood guard at the gates, checked travelers' documents, and helped customs officers collect taxes. Literate soldiers kept track of supplies, wrote reports, and conducted correspondence. The army was not only a fighting force, but also the main administrative resource on the border. Despite strict rules, soldiers' lives were not completely isolated. Although they were not officially allowed to marry during their service, in practice the command turned a blind eye to this. Many soldiers had unofficial families who lived in vici, settlements near the gates. These settlements were the center of social life for the garrison. There were taverns, baths, shops, and temples. During their free time, soldiers could visit their families, spend their pay, and socialize with civilians. This blurred the line between the military and civilian worlds, firmly tying the soldiers to this land. Nothing lasts forever, and the era of Roman walls, despite their power and significance, was no exception. Over time, the very principle of static, linear defense, which was the basis of the Roman security system, became obsolete. External threats and methods of warfare changed, and techniques that were once extremely effective began to lose their power. The walls that had protected the empire for so long were excellent at dealing with small and medium-sized raids by barbarian tribes, but they proved helpless in the face of large-scale migrations of entire peoples, such as the Huns, Vandals, and Goths, who could threaten not only one part of the empire, but its very existence. By the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, Rome's military doctrine had undergone significant changes. Instead of maintaining a rigid line of defense at its external borders, the empire shifted to a new strategy of deep defense. The main focus was on deploying mobile field armies that were stationed deep within the territory. These armies were tasked not with holding every kilometer of the border, as had been the case before, but with intercepting and destroying large enemy groups before they reached strategically important targets. This approach required flexibility and mobility that static walls could no longer provide. With the transition to new methods of defense, the walls, which had once been a symbol of the power and stability of the Roman Empire, began to fall into disrepair. The financial crisis that engulfed the empire played a significant role in this process. There were not enough funds to restore and maintain the enormous fortifications. The construction and maintenance of garrisons to guard these structures became an unbearable burden on the imperial treasury. The legions and auxiliary troops, auxilia, that had previously been stationed at the border were recalled to participate in civil wars or sent to defend more important and richer provinces, leaving the walls without adequate protection. Thus, the walls began to empty, the towers collapsed, and the forts fell into ruin. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, the walls, having lost their military significance, came to be perceived by local residents not as impregnable fortifications, but as a convenient source of building materials. Stones that were once part of Hadrian's wall or the Germanic limes were now used to build medieval churches, castles, and even farmhouses. These perfectly hewn stones often ended up in the foundations of buildings that became symbols of a new era. And thus the Roman walls continued to live on, but in a different context. However, despite the physical decline of these structures, the engineering concept did not disappear. The principles of Roman fortification, such as protruding towers, moats, and multi-layered gate defenses, were adopted by medieval builders of castles and fortifications. The Roman wall became the direct ancestor of the medieval fortress wall, and many of those who built castles in the Middle Ages studied Roman treatises on fortification, explored the ruins, and adopted the experience accumulated by Roman engineers. The ideas that were incorporated into the design of Roman walls lived on in subsequent generations, albeit in a slightly modified form. In some cases, the walls did not disappear completely, but were transformed into something else. For example, Hadrian's Wall, once a powerful defensive structure in northern Britain, served for many centuries as an unofficial but widely recognized border between England and Scotland. The stone barrier that once protected the Romans from the barbarians is gone, but the very idea of the border drawn by the Romans lives on in people's minds and on maps. Despite the destruction, the surviving sections of Hadrian's Wall and other fortifications remind us of the borders that were once defended by these grandiose structures. Today, the Roman walls are priceless archaeological monuments that give us a unique insight into life on the fringes of a great empire. Excavations of forts, towers, and vici, Roman settlements, have yielded valuable artifacts that allow us to immerse ourselves in the daily lives of the soldiers and citizens who lived in these areas. The household items, weapons, coins, and even personal letters of soldiers that have been found reveal details that help us understand how people lived in this remote and often dangerous region. It is a treasure trove of information that allows researchers and history buffs to touch the past and see it in a new light. Roman walls such as Hadrian's Wall or the remains of the Limes in Germany are now UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Thousands of tourists from all over the world come to walk among these ancient stones, which have become not only evidence of the military power of the Roman Empire, but also important cultural monuments. Now, these fortifications serve not to keep enemies at bay, but to remind people of the great history that preceded us and how much we have inherited from those who lived many centuries ago. We have completed our journey along the great Roman walls. These structures were much more than just defensive lines. They were complex systems that combined engineering genius, economic pragmatism, rapid communication, and powerful psychological impact. The walls were not the end of the Roman world, but its living, breathing, and working border. They were a filter, a customs office, a center of communication, and an engine of the economy. They demonstrate to us that true power lies not only in the ability to wage war, but also in the ability to organize, build, and manage. What do you think about this complex system? What other topics from the history of ancient Rome would you like us to cover in future episodes? Write your ideas in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our new investigations.